Okay, guys, as you may know or may not know, Bryson DeChambeau won the U.S. Open on Sunday after overcoming a two-shot lead over Rory McIlroy in the last 5 holes. I say overcoming because Bryson didn't even shoot over par in the last 5, although he did have one of the greatest shots in the history of major championships. Rory missed his first under 3-footer of the season and then blew an under 4-footer at 18 to seal the deal and not even go to a playoff. So you two always like to talk about being former athletes on this show and kind of disregarding my opinion, so to speak. So, as former athletes, what is your biggest choke job in your history?
Ooh.
Oh, I would say for me, I'm going back to my younger days. I played Little League Baseball, and we was beaten 13-1 by a all-girls baseball team.
Ouch.
Yeah, it was demoralizing, but also we almost got no hit. I got a hit in the 5th inning, and we got a bloop single about a couple of batters later. But other than that, we were kind of embarrassed. But that team, I mean, but the girls team, they have played. They pretty much been one of the best teams in the city, and for whatever reason, our manager thought it was a good idea to play them. And we only had been a baseball team for 2 weeks, and it was kind of humiliating, to say the least. And at that point, I decided, you know what, baseball's not my game, so I think I'll just focus on football.
Yeah.
For me, I'm going to go back to my time playing in the New York Urban Professionals Basketball League. We were up 15 in a championship game and just gave it away.
Hey, that's welcome. So no need to apply the Heimlich. It's on the sports lines for June 22nd, 2024. On today's episode, the Boston Celtics win title number 1-8. The NHL has 1 game to go for a championship. We go around the rest of the MLB because it's close to 1/2 over. And we take a look at why Turner won't be the one likely to broadcast the NBA anymore. Oh, and social media's weird public enemy number 1 and Caitlin Clark. We'll talk about that later on. Everything we'll be doing that. But first, we're going to get a little somber for a moment. One of the greatest baseball players of all time was Willie Mays. And in his 23 seasons spanning the Negro Leagues and Major Leagues, Willie did things on the field we rarely saw or never saw. Unfortunately, he passed away on Tuesday night. He was one of the greatest hitters of all time. He batted .301 and hit 660 dingers. One of the greatest fielders of all time. 12-time Gold Glove winner, and almost 70 years ago, in arguably the greatest defensive play in baseball history. There is so much to talk about. One of the icons of not only baseball, but sports of the 50s and 60s. Jay, what will you remember about the Say Hey Kid?
All right, hang on, guys, because we're going to take a ride on a train all the way from the Bronx through Manhattan to where the Polo Grounds used to be and coming back again. He may have spent the prime of his career in the city by the bay, but New Yorkers of a certain age and era have always felt the Say Hey Kid was one of our own. Started his career in Manhattan, finished it in Queens. The image of him playing stickball on the streets of Harlem is as indelible as the one of him tracking down Vic Wertz's 420-foot drive to the deepest part of center field in the Polo Grounds in the 1954 World Series. As you said, Rabbi, arguably the most famous catch of all time, after which, and people forget this because it's rarely shown, he spun and fired a laser back to the infield to prevent any runners from tagging up. Giants swept Cleveland for the only World Series title of Mays' career. He was hands down the most electrifying player in an age where baseball wasn't just the national pastime, but the focus of the American sports landscape, and its stars were the cultural icons of the age. Mays was the epitome of the 5-tool player. He could hit 3,293 hits when you factor in his Negro league numbers, with a career .301 batting average. He hit with power, 660 home runs, and a career .557 slugging percentage. He's only one of 4 players, along with Hank Aaron, and Alex Rodriguez, and Albert Pujols, with at least 600 hits, home runs, and 3,000 hits. He could run 339 stolen bases. He could field, as you said, Rabbi, 12 gold gloves. He'd have won more, but they didn't start inventing them and handing them out until 1957. He could throw. His 188 career assists in center field ranked 7th all time. His 59 career double plays is 3rd all time. Mays himself summed up his skill set pretty well. Here's the quote: "They throw the ball, I hit it. They hit the ball, I catch it." It may be overly simplistic, but very few made the game look as easy as Willie did. I mean, and that being said, you guys know I'm a numbers guy, especially when it comes to baseball. So I kind of had to go there with Mays, but I have to give full credit to Jason Stark of The Athletic for the ones I'm about to lay on you. Some of them even blew my mind. Mays is the only player to have seasons in which he led the league in all 10 of these categories: hits, runs, homers, triples, steals, batting average, on-base slugging, total bases, walks. Per 9 of those 10 in any given season. You might have heard of them: Lou Gehrig, Rogers Hornsby, Ty Cobb. Mays is the only player to ever win 4 home run titles and 4 stolen base titles, and he's one of only 5 players to hit a home run at both age 20 and age 40. You might have heard of the other 4: Ted Williams, Hank Aaron, Stan Musial, and George Brett. But only Williams, Mays, and Aaron hit double-digit home runs for the same team at those ages. That is just crazy. Mays had 6 seasons of wins above replacement WAR of at least 10 per Baseball Reference. How good is that? Well, Mickey Mantle and Lou Gehrig had 5 seasons combined. He also led the National League in WAR 10 times. That's as many as Ted Williams, Hank Aaron, and Lou Gehrig put together. If WAR had been an actual thing during Mays' career, I get the feeling he'd have won more than 2 MVP awards. From 1954 to 1966, Mays' average season for WAR was 9.5 for a total of 124.1. The only players with even 1 season of 9.5 WAR are Mike Trout, Aaron Judge, Bryce Harper, and Mookie Betts. The only position player in the modern era that produced a higher WAR over a 13-year period than Mays' 124.1 is Babe Ruth, 132.2 from 1919 to 1931. Mays is the only player to hit a home run in every inning from the first through the 16th. I got to say, I geeked out on that one, courtesy of Jason via the Society for American Baseball Research. The 16th inning home run broke up a 0-0 pitchers duel between Warren Spahn and Juan Marichal. Both of them pitched all 16 innings. Now, that's a couple of legendary Hall of Fame aces on July 2nd, 1963. Here's some other career highlights from Willie Mays. Made his Giants debut May 25th, 1951, less than 3 weeks after his 20th birthday. Still managed to win Rookie of the Year, hit 274, 20 home runs, helped the Giants win the National League pennant in a 3-game playoff over the hated Dodgers. And this is the answer to one of my favorite trivia questions. Willie Mays was the guy on deck for Bobby Thompson's shot heard around the world home run that year in that game. He missed 2 full seasons, 52 and 53, to military service. When he returned in 54, made the first of his 24 All-Star games. There was a period where 2 were played. And he won the NL MVP with a .345 batting average and 41 dingers. 1954 to 1965, he averaged 40 homers a season, led the league with 49 to help the Giants win the 62 National League pennant. They lost to the Yankees in the World Series. He had a career high 52 in 1965 as he went on to win his 2nd National League MVP. Hit his 600th home run in 1969, becoming the only other player besides Ruth to reach that mark. Sporting News named him Player of the Decade for the 60s. When he retired after helping the Mets to the 1973 National League pennant, he had 3,283 hits, 660 homers, those 338 steals, 12 gold gloves using just his National League stats. He was elected to the Hall in 1979. When President Obama presented Mays with the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2015, he said, quote, "It's because of Willie that someone like me could even think about running for president." And in 2017, the World Series MVP trophy was renamed in Willie Mays' honor and shows him making that catch against Cleveland in 1954. Hank Aaron, who died in 2021, might be the reasonable player comparison. What Willie Mays did on the diamond was oftentimes so awe-inducing, words can fail to truly describe it, but I'm going to let Hall of Fame broadcaster Bob Costas, who said the following after the passing of the Say Hey Kid, give it a try. Here's the quote. You can certainly make the case that Hank Aaron was the better hitter of the two by a narrow margin, and Hank was also a great outfielder and base runner, but Willie was just a magnificent all-around player who exuded joy. He just transmitted it. It's like Michael Jordan in basketball. If you'd never been to a basketball game and no one told you who was who, your eyes would automatically go to Michael Jordan. And if you'd never been to a baseball game and no one told you who was who, your eyes would go to Willie Mays, even if he was 0 for 4, even if there was no spectacular play, even if it was just the way he did it, the way he carried himself. He was Willie Mays.
One stat that I just found that is astounding is in his career, Willie Mays faced 14 Hall of Fame pitchers, a 286 batting average, an 859 OPS, and he hit 56 of his 660 career homers against Hall of Famers. 18 against Warren Spahn, 13 against Don Drysdale, and the two people who he faced the most, Warren Spahn and Don Drysdale, and he hit 300 against both of them. This is literally a guy who's done everything to bridge the race barrier gap, although he wasn't as vocal as Jackie Robinson was, and he didn't want to be, which is perfectly his own right. And just, he's the greatest living player. He was the greatest living player alive, and I think he was the best overall player alive. Anthony, your thoughts?
Well, you mentioned that he ended his career with the Mets, so I guess I'll take you on the train ride to Flushing. And he was traded to the Mets in May 11, 1972, and he spent the last 2 seasons of his career with the Mets, obviously. And I'll read an interesting story on MLB.com. Then Mets principal owner Joan Payson was a minority owner of the Giants. When they moved to San Francisco, she sold her stake in the team and actually vowed that she would bring Willie Mays back to New York before his playing days ended. When she traded for Mays, Willie Mays' owner was about to retire, but she made, by his own words, an offer he couldn't refuse. Basically, name your price, and just sign a contract. So he did just that. And despite he being 41 at the time and clearly not the same player, hampered by knee issues, he finished his career his last season with the Mets with a 238 batting average, 14 home runs, and 44 RBIs in 135 games. Actually, homered in his Mets debut on May 14, 1972, was a big part of the Mets' 1973 National League Championship team. Got a hit in the deciding Game 5 of that series, and the National League Championship Series against Cincinnati that scored a run. And his last game was actually Game 2 of the World Series against Oakland. And famously, he had issues in the outfield, and that was the case for everyone that played the outfield during the daylight hours in Oakland, that stadium, and the old Fulton, the old stadium setup, where sunlight was an issue during those afternoon games. But to quote Ed Kranepool, who was his closest teammate and friend, his locker room presence was probably the biggest thing. And he talked about Mays. If there was a guy that was pitching the next day and the team wanted to dinner, he would tell the pitcher to go home, get some rest, just start the next day. And just Kranepool's quote, he was a big addition to us, not because of his playing, but inspirationally. He helped all the players in the clubhouse and tried to improve their play, and they did. He was a tremendous asset to the ball club just by being there. So it was actually, obviously, me being a Mets fan, I thought it was very cool that the Cohens 2 years ago retired Willie Mays, number 24. With obviously the Giants' successors in the National League, being the Mets 2 seasons ago. Willie Mays, my first footage of watching him actually play was actually the old Home Run Derby TV show that used to come on Classic Sports, and the classic matchup with him and Mickey Mantle. And
that was the first episode of that TV show ever, I believe.
It was.
Yes, and I just remember going back and you see the catch and the polo grounds, and remember Willie Mays saying he wasn't worried too much about the catch as much as just getting the ball back into the infield to prevent a run from advancing. And when you to see the tributes and everything, and I just got to show you guys a snapshot of the vocal service paying tribute to Willie Mays' catch on the screensaver. Um, it, I don't, and Jay, I think you pretty much summed it up. I don't think there's enough words that can sum up what Willie Mays meant to the game of baseball, what he's meant to sports off the field, what he's meant to so many people as an inspiration. Um, and and obviously the man is going to be sorely missed, but the legend, the legacy, and everything that he's left behind is something that's going to be talked about for sports fans to come, our generation, the generation following us.
Yep.
Talking about Willie Mays, it's going to be like I say, it's just an amazing baseball player, amazing man, amazing human being that that has left a lasting mark on everyone.
Jay, I actually want to follow up on something that Jay had said about before about when 51, when Mays was on deck for the shot heard around the world. He won the Rookie of the Year that year. I don't know if you mentioned it in that. And interestingly enough, you know what he did for the next 2 years? He went to war. He went to military service and came back and was the best hitter in baseball. He hit 42 home runs, and 41 home runs, I'm sorry, and batted 345 that year, which is insane. And also the fact that, again, that was the one thing that shocks me is that's his only World Series. I know you're living at a time.
It's his only title. It's not the only time he went to the World Series.
And, well, no, I know. It's his only World Series title. And he only went 4 times. Mm-hmm. One was the year was 51 and one was 54. He only went with the Giants at his peak one more time. And then when he was, it's kind of weird when you notice it because we really associate a lot. Again, this is nothing. There's no comparison, by the way, to Mays. I love Hank Aaron, but I think Mays is the original 5-tool player in all of baseball. And honestly, I don't think I can name somebody who has the complete package as Willie Mays. I think Babe Ruth probably was a better hitter, probably knowing what the stats are, and there were probably better home run hitters, but didn't compile. That's my Hank Aaron line, but I digress. But there's just not a lot to say. And the timing of this coming right by when the Negro League game happened at Ricketts Field on Thursday is very interesting, just seeing all the celebrations of Willie, hearing some of the old players, some of the players of the 90s and 2000s talk about Willie, especially his godson Barry Bonds. And just there's so much. It's been a very interesting week seeing because there was a story that, Willie Mays isn't going to attend, even though all of this stuff happened. And then we unfortunately find out about his passing on Tuesday. So we really got a look to hear about the history of baseball this week, especially before full integration. I know obviously Jackie Robinson integrated in 1947 and Larry Doby did in 1948 in the AL, but that doesn't mean that they were widely accepted, especially when they moved to San Francisco back in 1957. That was a struggle too. So there is so much that we could say about Willie Mays. I know this is a cliche, but so little time. And I think just the impact that he's had in the game of baseball, he is one of the best athletes of that era of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and even today. Honestly, he meant more to the world of sports and to the world of African American culture than I think almost anyone did around that time, just because of what he achieved and what he did for our country.
Yeah, I mean, HBO did a terrific documentary on him in 2022. And if you haven't yet seen it, I highly recommend checking it out. It's really well done.
All right, guys, let's move on to the hockey and the Stanley Cup Finals. Guys, let's go back in time. 9 days ago to June 13th. The Yankees were rolling into a series with Boston. Grimace was barely a thing as he only had pitched the day before throw out the first pitch the day before. And the Florida Panthers were up 3-0 on the Edmonton Oilers on the verge of the franchise's first Stanley Cup. Fast forward to June 22nd. The Yankees are 2-5 since then. The Mets are now 6-2 since then. And after respective scores of 8-1, 5-3, and 5-1, the Edmonton Oilers have forced the two greatest words in sports, Game 7 on Monday night in the Sunshine State. Only two other teams down 3-0 in the finals from Lord Stanley's Chalice have even forced a Game 7, and they both happened in the 1940s, and they were both Canadian teams, if I'm not mistaken, doing so.
Correct.
So now,
no.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Team, one Detroit team.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't know it was Detroit, but still, both times it happened in the 40s. The Canadian team and the Maple Leafs did it in 1942. The Red Wings failed to do it in 48 or
45.
45? Wow.
45.
Okay, but they both happened in the 40s. Never extend the stats if you don't know all of them. Just a heads up. Now the Oilers all of a sudden have a chance to give Florida its first Chalice hoist in over 3 decades. Throw out the script, guys, and blame Canada. Anthony, the Panthers will finally finish the damn job and win on Monday if
they get their mojo back. And I know that sounds cliche, and I know I texted you guys last night, and Bab, I was joking to you about it like yesterday. I didn't know how to prepare for this segment. Was I preparing for a coordination, or am I preparing for a Game 7 with a team that is literally on its heels as it possibly can get? Just go back in time. They were outscored Edmonton 11-4. Since the third period of Game 3, they have been outscored 18-5 in the last 3 games. The Edmonton Oilers have scored 17 of the last 21 goals in this series. And I had to give PK Subban of obviously ESPN this credit for this. They have given up 20 goals in this series on odd man rushes, or at least odd or even rushes for that matter. The discipline that I had talked about the Florida Panthers all season long, and even against the conference finals against a very potent offensive Asian team, has disappeared completely. It seemed like Edmonton's completely solved that aggressive forecheck and is actually used it against Florida, which has led to some of these odd man rushes. The stars have disappeared pretty much in this too. So I have to put out a missile report for Sam Reinhart, Connor Vergahey. Alexander Barkov is seems like the only one chipping in, and when he does, that's taken off the board in somewhat controversial fashion. We saw in the beginning of the second period last night. A goal that, who knows, probably keeps Florida hanging around longer than expected, was taken off the board. He did eventually score the only goal. But then you look at this, Vergahey hasn't had a goal since Game 1 in this series. His assist to Barkov in that third period has been the only other point for him in this series. Matthew Tkachuk finally somewhat got on track in Game 5. Reinhardt, who scored 57 goals in the regular season, just have one in this series. The special teams has been just as bad. They're 0-for-11 in the last 3 games on the power play. And even in a critical one, the third period, they couldn't get off a single shot on goal. And after going 14 of 60, 22% in the first 3 rounds of this conference finals, they have gone 1 for 19 since in this series, 6 games against the Oilers. The lone power play goal came in the third period of Game 2. Meanwhile, the Oilers have just completely dismantled the Florida Panthers when they've had the man advantage. It gets to the point where, and I hate to bring this up because you guys are Yankee fans, in 2004 with the Red Sox. And this is something and remember in that series, there was a rain delay that kind of forced the teams to play consecutive games without a travel day. And I thought that was one of the biggest factors in the Yankees' collapse, was the fact that they didn't have a day away from the diamond to kind of gather themselves and to get their heads back, to kind of clear their heads a little bit, because they just had to play the next game. In this case, the Panthers going to have a couple of days off. I think it's a simplifying days. Get back to the basis of what got you this far in the first place. One shift at a time. Win your shift. It's the quote, the great Ho Brooks. Do your job. I think that's what it has to come down to for Florida to finally put this series away. Is because look, what Stern can't be undone. You up 3 games to 9. Now here you are with one game, winner take all. It comes down to this one shift at a time. Win your shift, move on to the next one, and to just keep things as simple as possible. I think that's the only way the Florida Panthers can go at this point, because everything else has completely backfired on them. I mean, the aggressive forechecking has worked against them. And Rabbi talk about the goalies in a second, but also the stars that has carried them has not cashed in also. And so it just gets to the point where you're just gonna have to take a day to step away from hockey. Just step away from the ice, get your head together, go back to practice, let's get back to the basics, and then Game 7, let's take it 1 minute, one shift, one moment at a time, and let the chips fall where they may.
Anthony hitting the cliche bingo card there, by the way.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the free space would be, but definitely all of those hit. Jay,
when you squander a 3-0 lead, cliches is the only thing you got going for you, because everything else is not going.
That's true. The only thing I would disagree with you is just because of the nature of hockey, and we've seen it happen a little more often than in the other sports. It's not easy to come back from 3-0 down, but it's not impossible to come back from 3-0 down. And one thing that, before I get to EJ, that is interesting is the fact that we saw the same thing in the Celtics-Mavericks series, how the Mavericks just dominated Game 4, and Boston was like, okay, we'll take care of this in Game 5. And the Panthers did not do that the next night, and that's it showed that the 8-1 game kind of had a snowball effect to where we are right now. Jay, Lord Stanley's Chalice, check, will go to Edmonton for the first time in 34 years on Monday night. If
Connor McDavid is the Game 4 and 5 version of Connor McDavid. He was, quiet on Friday night. Barely a mention of his name throughout the broadcast. You could go so far as to say the Oilers' 5-1 win in Game 6 happened in spite of him, since he barely made a dent in the box score. But I say that if Connor McDavid didn't do Connor McDavid, McJesus things in Games 4 and 5, there isn't even a chance for the Game 7 we're getting on Monday night. I told you when we previewed this series that the casual hockey fans, the ones that only tune in for the final leg of the chase for Lord Stanley's Chalice, were in for a treat, as they would get to see the best player in the NHL on the NHL's biggest stage. Now, I'm sure after the first 3 games, they were probably giving me the raised eyebrow, thinking I have no clue what I'm talking about. Granted, the Edmonton captain got off to a slow start, no goals and only 3 assists and a plus-minus of 0 as the Oilers went down into that 0-3 hole. But if you stuck around, you saw what I told you you'd see. McDavid had 3 goals and 5 assists across Games 4 and 5, almost single-handedly keeping the Oilers season alive, and in doing so, he put himself in some very special company located in some very rarefied hockey air. He became the first player with back-to-back 4-point games in a Stanley Cup final, and he set the record with 8 points when facing elimination in a Stanley Cup final. You'd have to go back more than 8 decades to find a player who even put up 7 points under such circumstances. That 7-point club consists of 3 members, Don Metz and Sil Apps of those aforementioned 1942 Toronto Maple Leafs, who are, to this point in history, as Rabbi said, the only NHL team to rebound from an 0-3 deficit in the Stanley Cup final and win. And Babe Dye of the Toronto St. Patrick's, who was the first member of this 7-point club way back in 1922. Metz and Apps did their 7 points over 4 games, while Dye, like McDavid, did it in 2. McDavid also set the record for most points in a Stanley Cup final among active players with 11, reaching double digits during Game 5, and the 11-point mark with his empty netter with 19 seconds left in that game. It's the best output in a Stanley Cup final since the Flyers' Daniel Briere had 12 points in 2010. McDavid is just 2 assists and 2 points from tying fellow Edmonton Oiler Wayne Gretzky for both categories in a single Stanley Cup final. The great one had 10 assists and 13 points back in 1988. McDavid tied Ken Linseman's Stanley Cup final mark of 5 assists when facing elimination. Linseman accomplished that mark in 2 games with the Philadelphia Flyers in 1980. McDavid also tied the record for most points when facing elimination in a single postseason with 11. Edmonton was on the brink of being bounced by Vancouver in round 2. McDavid had 3 assists over games 6 and 7 to help keep the Oilers' playoff hopes alive. Add those to the 8 points in games 4 and 5 of the finals. That's the 11 points in 4 elimination games, tying him with Justin Williams and Anze Kopitar of the Los Angeles Kings 10 years ago, and the New York Rangers' Mika Zibanejad 2 years ago. Williams and Kopitar did it in 7 games. Zibanejad did it in 6. And finally, with his 3 assists in game 4 and 2 more in game 5, McDavid tied and then passed Gretzky for the most assists in a single postseason with 34. Gretzky had 31 for the Oilers back in 1988, the last of his 4 Stanley Cup titles with Edmonton. McDavid has pretty much locked up his place among the greatest to ever lace up skates with what he's done this postseason. Is it enough to put his name on the Conn Smythe Trophy as the Stanley Cup playoffs MVP, regardless of the outcome of Game 7? I'd have to say, yeah. I said it at the top, but I'll say it again here. The Oilers don't even have a chance at Game 7 if McDavid doesn't put the team and its season on his back, his skates, and his stick in Games 4 and 5. His teammate defenseman Matthias Ekholm said it best. Here's the quote. What I'm most impressed about with him is the bigger the moment, the bigger the performance he puts on. We're on the brink of elimination, and he puts up 4 points 2 nights in a row. That's just him in a nutshell. He wants to be the guy. He is the guy. To me, he's the best in the world. End quote. And Connor McDavid will have to be that guy one more time if the Oilers are going to make Stanley Cup Finals history on Monday.
It's been 21 years, by the way, since we've had a loser of the Cup Finals win the Conn Smythe Trophy, and I have a feeling you're probably right, but we'll see what happens on Monday. Okay, so on this show, we've talked very much so about the phrase bad Bob and good Bob. We've also talked on this show, because I've argued a lot. Jay has told me a lot of times that if a goalie sees more shots, they're going to lose, which is perfectly fine. That seems reasonable. But doing my math, Sergei Bobrovsky, here's what I found. There have been 9 times this postseason, 9, where he has faced 25 shots or less and let up 2 goals or more, which is an insane number because that's what it seems like it's been in these playoffs. Good Bob was there in the first 3 games. He had a shutout in game 1. Game 2 just let up a goal. Game 3 is kind of where everything started, but he was still at the .914 shooting save percentage that night, saving 32 of 35 shots. But the last 3 games, 5 goals in just 16 shots for a sterling .688 save percentage, 4 goals and 23 shots in the game at home for an .826, and then on Friday night, 3 goals on 19 shots for an .842 save percentage. Simply put, Bob has to be just a tiny bit better. Now, that's just to say that this is not just his fault. You need the defense behind you, and as Ranger fans, I think we know how Igor Shesterkin is only one man. If he sees shots that he can easily stop. In breakaways, they've had 4 chances in game 1 and 2 to the Oilers. They didn't score on any of them. They've had 4 chances in games 3 through 6 on breakaways. They've scored on every single one of those chances. So, bad Bob is going to have to be better Bob. I think you can go 2 ways in the game 7. You could have everybody on ice, pun intended, and just really not do the best. Or we could be lighting the lamp more to basically light up the state of Florida for at least the next 2 to 3 months. We'll see what happens on Monday. The shocking thing is Stuart Skinner, who all of a sudden, one of the reasons why I had to think that the Florida Panthers had a huge advantage is they had the advantage in net. Remember, Stuart Skinner was benched this postseason, and, well, guess what? He's doing a lot better. Since he came back, by the way, he is now 9-5 with a 2.05 goals against average and a .915 save percentage. But and he's had some very good games going forward. He stopped 32 of 33 shots in that 8-1 game on June 15th. 29 of 32 shots on June 18th in that game 5, and then in game 6 last night, he shot 21 of 20. But one of the fun things that I found that I just thought was really insane. By the way, he stopped a total of 81 of 86 shots, by the way, since that game 4. But one of the things I found is really insane. In games 4 through 7 of the postseason this season, Stuart Skinner is perfect. He is 10-0. This has only happened 3 times in the history of hockey, and they've all come recently. They came, the one losing effort was Martin Brodeur in 2012 with the New Jersey Devils against the Los Angeles Kings, but the other 2, Corey Crawford in 2013 for the Chicago Blackhawks, they won the Cup, and 2019 for Jordan Bennington of the St. Louis Blues, who is the last goalie to be in a Game 7 and win on the road. And another fun fact, the last 3 Game 7s on the road have been won by the road team. That in 19, 2011 when the Bruins did it to the Vancouver Canucks, not a pleasant day for Canada, and in 2009 when the Penguins did it to the Red Wings, not a pleasant day for Detroit. Monday is going to be very, very interesting, not just with the goalies, not just with the Stars, but with the fans of Florida whose hearts are going to be in their throats the whole entire time. And just to see what Edmonton does. It's a very interesting situation. You don't want to ruin what happens if you come back from 3-0 down and still lose in Game 7, but the pressure's all on the team from Sunrise on Monday. This could be a very historic choke that no team ever wants to be a part of.
No, this will, if the Oilers do manage to pull this off, I think this will go down as not just the biggest choke job in a championship series in the NHL. It's going to rival anything in any other sport, because it just
in a championship round, in a championship round.
Yeah, I mean, and the funny thing, we do kick around good Bob and bad Bob, and the funny thing is that, and maybe it's because of the Will Smith movie trailer that's been that's been bouncing around, but bad Bob, what's he gonna do? What's he gonna do when the Oilers come for you? We'll see what happens Monday night.
I wish you never said that. I wish I had just immediately ended the segment there.
You can't unhear, can you?
No.
And I just feel the Bad Bob has a horror movie. That's the B-list horror movie that just comes up randomly. It's not a pretty picture to watch, but once you get into it, you just can't turn away, and it seems to get worse as the movie go on. That's Bad Bob in a heartbeat. I mean, Good Bob would be the first Friday the 13th movie, and Bad Bob would be part 8 when he pops up in Manhattan randomly.
That's not a bad comparison. By the way, fun fact, I think if this happens, we will have had in the NHL, we would forget it. Hold on. What I wanted to say is this: the biggest choke job in any championship game history is still 28-3. But when you do baseball, basketball, and hockey, because they are best of 7 series, this is going to be pretty close. We'll see what happens. Again, Florida Panthers, this is their first Stanley Cup championship they're going for. Not only are they trying to avoid dubious distinction, they would still be titleist and really, really be in one of those situations where it's just like, what the hell can we ever do to make up for this? So the franchise changing Monday night for them, just to say the least. All right, let's go to the hardwood. The Boston Celtics have had one of the greatest runs in NBA history. 2 titles in the 50s, 9 titles in the 60s, 2 titles in the 70s, and 3 in the 80s. But after dry 90s and 1 title from 2008 that, Anthony, we've talked about some former players continue to hammer home about, even if you don't care about it because you've heard it 1,000 times. The Celtics won title number 18 on Monday night, winning 106-88, finishing let's face it, gentleman's sweep of 5 games against the Dallas Mavericks, with the 4 wins coming by an average of 12.5 points. Now Boston Celtics fans don't have to discount the Lakers bubble title as the claim to as the reason why they're not the winningest franchise in NBA history. They're now back into that season. Anthony, final thoughts, starting with what the Celtics did.
Well, for the Celtics, it's a combination of the Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, duo that so many people, including myself, I said this a while back, that the Celtics couldn't win with both these guys, and obviously I've been proven to be wrong, just to so many people as well. But I think Game 5 is pretty much symbolic of the two guys who drafted back-to-back seasons, 2017, 2018 respectively, 2016, 2017, and 2017, 2018 respectively. They combined for 52 points, 16 rebounds, 17 assists. There's some thunder going on behind me. Can't really hear it because I have the headpieces in. But also when you look at Jason Tatum's numbers, he had 31 points, 11, 24 shooting. And he actually missed 6 of his 3-point attempts. Jaylen Brown actually had one of the worst games of the postseason. When I talked about the last show, Jason Tatum kind of being the secondary guy, almost voluntarily, and being more the facilitator. It was kind of the formula that worked. You kind of think about the postseason runs the past, and this is a team that had been to the conference finals, and even a finals appearance, and with 6 of the last 8 seasons, they've pretty much been on the cusp of a championship. It was just a matter of, can they actually get over the hump? It felt like the two guys was kind of stepping on each other's toes and saying, okay, like trying to take turns of kind of being the guy.
Your turn.
You wonder, yeah, it was. You kind of wonder if one to step back. And in this case, it would be Jason Tatum. I think it showed Tatum's leadership growth in the fact that he decided, okay, Jaylen Brown is our go-to guy. He's got it going to kind of run the offense more through him. And you kind of saw that. And for Tatum, it's a capital to a young man who grew up idolizing Kobe Bryant, who came in year 1. He's locked in. He's locked up against LeBron in Game 7 of a conference final. A memorable facial dunk over LeBron too. And really since then, Tatum has been kind of the face of the Celtics franchise. And for Jaylen Brown, it's retribution, because he's kind of been the guy that's always been in trade rumors, and the guy that one famous ESPN personality we would not name kind of set up a media firestorm last month, suggested that he had an attitude problem that rubbed teams GMs the wrong way. So, and obviously, I don't know if you saw the show he wore to
Check your source?
the parade. Yeah,
State your source. State your source. Is what it was.
Has kind of a shot at that particular individual. But I have to bring this up too, and this is 2 people I have to talk about. Brad Stevens, to step away from the sidelines, the head coach, to go to the front office, and to put the team together the way he did. You know, Al Horford, who's been with the team 8 seasons, Derek White, who has been a key part of this team, whether he was starting or come off the bench, getting Kristaps Porzingis, but probably the biggest, one of the biggest acquisitions was Drew Holiday, the championship experience from 2021. And his decision to part with Marcus Smart along the way, too. You think about Marcus Smart rolling his team. He was the heart and soul. He was the culture of the Boston Celtics and the toughness. And he made the decision to move Marcus Smart. And obviously, with Drew Holiday coming in, he brought not just the defense that you were losing with Marcus Smart, but the championship pedigree from 2021 with the Milwaukee Bucks was very good with his defense in the final series, whether it was against Luka or even a few matchups when he was matched up one-on-one with Kyrie. That what Brad Stevens was able to do, and putting this team together should not be overlooked whatsoever. I think Red Auerbach would be thrilled, to be proud to show
without a doubt. So would Danny Ainge.
To show Yeah, and that's another guy too, Danny Ainge. The trade that keeps on giving, if you're on the Boston Celtics, that the 2013 trade that for Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce to the Brooklyn Nets, and for those draft picks, and those two of those picks became Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum
Right.
respectively.
That's right.
So that's I think the spirit of Red Auerbach is kicking back with a stogie with a glass of Moet in his left hand, and he's hosting two
Keep
of his
smiling.
successors, putting together a team that brought title number 18 to now the winningest franchise in the NBA. So and it pains me as a Knicks fan to walk past Penn Station and see a 20-foot billboard of Jason Tatum outside the world most famous arena. But I mean, it's a championship well deserved ever since open night when they played at Madison Garden against the Knicks. They've been the best team all year long. They had those head scratching moments where they were lose a game against Miami inexplicably with no Jimmy Butler, or get blown out by 20 on national television by a banged up Knicks team. And there were just so many head scratching moments. But overall, this was the better. It's the first time I think in a long time we've seen the team with the best record win the championship. And it's a total team effort from top to bottom. So they've earned their celebration, but without a doubt.
One
Yeah,
thing that go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rabbi.
No, one thing that I noticed today when talking about the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum back-to-back picks, do you realize that in 2016 and 2017, the order of the top 4 picks were exactly the same? Phoenix,
Yep.
LA, Boston, Phoenix.
Yep.
And it turned out that most of these franchises are pretty good right now in terms of that, but I think Phoenix and LA would probably want to do over on those two drafts. I mean, sorry, Philadelphia and LA would definitely want to do over on those 2 drafts. I think you would agree, Jay.
Yeah.
One more thing I do want to say is Joe Mazzulla grew up big time.
Yeah.
Weird guy from what many people have said, but he grew up and he really became the heir apparent and did a very good job in terms of knowing exactly what his team really needed to do and what his team and how to make this team the best it could be.
Yeah, I mean, Mazzulla is in terms of NBA coaches and how they fit with the team that they run. He's the epitome of a phrase I use often when talking about my friendship with Nisa, to my niece and nephew. They get on their mom's case and say, "Oh my God, mom, you're crazy." And I'll look at them and go, "Yeah, but your mom's my kind of crazy." The Boston Celtics will, to a man, will tell you Joe Mazzulla is a little unique. He might be a little crazy, but he's their kind of crazy. And I think having a full off season and a full training camp to really put his stamp and his philosophy and his way of doing things on this team, and them all buying in, from Tatum and Brown and Horford and everyone all down the line, is why it worked this year. You can honestly, I don't think that the Boston Celtics no longer care whether or not they have the best player on the floor in any game, and that has for a while, and we've done it ourselves, been a knock on Jason Tatum. They only care about being the best team on the floor in any given game or in any given series. And I think you saw that in this playoff run. I mean, Anthony, I'll go back to something you said. You talk about, a big move to trade Smart. Here's the thing. He may have been the heart, the Marcus Smart may have been the heart and soul of that team, but I don't think he fit the direction Joe Mazzulla was looking to take this team. And you can say what you want. He's a big personality. Say what you want about Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum.
No,
they're no shrinking violets, but they're not big personalities in terms of yapping and talking. They let their game do their talking for them. I think in every single way possible, on the floor, off the floor, Drew Holiday was a ridiculous upgrade at that position. And to me, he right there is the epitome of the type of guy that Stevens and Missoula were looking to bring in. A guy who cares about one thing and one thing only, and that's winning. He does whatever you ask of him. He knows he's a Swiss Army knife. You need him to run the point, he'll run the point. You need him to grab 11 rebounds, he'll grab 11 rebounds. You need him to drop 30 points, he'll drop 30 points. You need him to lock down the other team's best scorer, he'll do that. He does not care what you need him to do. He doesn't care about his numbers. He cares about one thing, and that's winning. And I think he was you talk about being able to get over the top. I think his acquisition, both on and off the court, is what got them over the top. As far as the Mavericks go, my final thoughts here. It comes down to this. When we did our NBA Finals preview, we focused on the dynamic duos for each team. The Jays in Boston, and Anthony just did a great job with that. And Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving in Dallas. I think we can safely say that it was fully done. Banner 18 in his part for the Mavericks. I think he did everything he could do based on the way the Celtics went out of their way to go at him. He averaged 29 points a game, 8 boards, 5.6 assists, even though some of those calories may have been empty, if you will. He should one percent from beyond the arc. 58. Rabbi, we good?
Yeah, we're good. I just broke off on audio there, so we're still recording, so keep going. Hello?
All right, Kyrie and a 21-point performance in game 4. Yeah,
Hold on.
Rabbi, we good?
Yeah, we're good now. Okay, keep going.
You do?
You want me to? Are you done?
Okay. All right. Including missing his first 8 and only made 4 trips to the charity stripe. It culminated in a 5 for 16 shooting night in the Game 5 series clincher. That was actually worse than it looked, as a few of his buckets came in the extended garbage time that was the fourth quarter. Kyrie admitted that the Kyrie sucks chants raining down from the TD Garden Raptors got into his head in the first 2 games of the series, largely because he couldn't put up the type of numbers Dallas needed from him. He needed 37 shots over those first 2 games to score just 28 points, and was very much not the Robin he'd been to Doncic's Batman during the regular season. He was hesitant, he was passive, and he looked very unsure of his game. To borrow another DC comment, but I do have to give credit where credit is due. Despite his struggles on the court, Irving never let it affect the leadership Dallas has come to expect from him. When he checked out of Game 5 for the final time with 2 minutes and 37 seconds left on the clock and the game long decided on the scoreboard, he went over to the Celtics bench and gave his former teammates and Celtics coach Joe Mazzulla congratulatory hugs. He said it was a sign of respect towards the Celtics for them overcoming their previous postseason mishaps, including their 2022 NBA Finals loss to Golden State and losing in the Eastern Conference Finals last season to Miami. He also hugged all of his Mavericks teammates as they walked off the court to the locker room after the game. Kyrie may have been unable to meet the moment in his latest trip to the NBA Finals, but if he and Luka can take their partnership to the next level, bringing a title to Dallas is possible. But they should try to avoid playing the Celtics next time.
I don't know if that's their choice, but
yeah,
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I see your point, Jay. With Luka, it's definitely gonna be a learning experience. His trip to the finals. You think about what happened at the end of during Game 4 and the criticism he took, not just
Game 3, not Game 4, by the way.
Game 3, sorry, Game 3. Where he spent a lot of time arguing calls and going back and forth with the officials. That's definitely something he's gonna have to learn.
Yeah.
He's gonna have to learn to cut down on considerably if he wants to get back to this stage. But also Kyrie Irving, I never seen a player struggle so minorly playing in a particular venue, as Kyrie has done with that TD Garden. And you have to go back to even a couple years ago, the playoff series when he was a member of the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, he had a brilliant Game 1 and then completely disappeared the rest of the series. And I think, and obviously to submission, that the chance that they did get to him. I mean, this is a guy who played for the Boston Celtics, and he was, for 2 years, he was supposed to be the guy that was going to take them to that championship, and then never materialized. But his maturity and his leadership this season, his growth definitely cannot be understated without a question. I do think that the Mavericks are going to have to figure out a way, because I saw times in the series, but there were two relying on one-on-one with Luka and Kyrie, just kind of creating for others and for themselves. They're going to have to find a way to be a little more creative offensively at some point. But the pieces are down. Obviously one of the trades, PJ Washington, halfway through the season was a big pickup.
Yeah.
And Gafford and Lively is obviously a great young player.
Mm-hmm.
So they have the pieces still to make another run. Gonna be tough. The Western Conference is pretty brutal. We've seen this season, just in particular, good teams finishing close to 50 wins, and they were not even second or third in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
So they got their work cut out for them. But it's like I said, Luka continue to grow by Kyrie's leadership. Who's to say that they couldn't get back to the stage next year?
You never know.
And Luka Doncic is the first player in NBA history, by the way, to lead the league in the postseason for points, rebounds, assists, and steals. So there's definitely something there in terms of having one of the best runs. We've already seen him in the bubble make an impossibly awesome shot and buzzer beater in just his first playoff series. And to what he's turned into now, he's only two players to average 30 points in the postseason. The other one is obviously Michael Jordan. And Jordan stands, you would always remind me regardless, because this guy on the bottom right here. And I think one thing that does need to change, I know Nico Harris said in his post-game conference, is that everybody needs to be 50% better. I don't know what Luka Doncic can do to be 50% better, but I think that 50% better has to stop with arguing every call. That wasn't during Game 3. It was the entire playoffs. It seems to be his image now, which is a very European thing in terms of in EuroLeague arguing call after call after call. That doesn't fly all the time in the NBA, and honestly makes me not like him as much as a player. His defense, it does need to improve. Now, the numbers are not great in terms of what he did this postseason, but we've seen worse defense in the NBA. James Harden.
No, Rabbi, you can't use Harden as an example because he doesn't even play defense. Luka,
but it's still bad. It's still bad. It's still bad defense. No defense is bad defense. That is the rule it is. But there is a stat that I thought was really interesting. You probably see that he had 13 blow-bys against him in game 2 of the finals. His blow by percentage was, I think, first in that series against, I think that's the amount of times. Oh, it was worse. But get this. He's not only number 1 on the list in blow by percentage, he's number 2 on the list, and he's number 3 on the list for a series. That's right. Every one of his series this postseason made the list for worst percentage of being blown by in those situations. It's who he is. I do understand that, but there needs to be, if you're going to make that adjustment from being a great player to an all-time player, you need to get your defense up to a little better of a level. He's not all of a sudden going to make an all-defensive team, but it needs to be better in that. Doesn't have to be, obviously.
No, but to use your favorite word, Rabbi, he just needs to be serviceable, and he flat out was not this year in the season.
Well,
he can't be
everyone else.
He can't be a Matador and just play the Olay defense. That is not going to fly the
not going to work. You know, if you resemble a New York City subway turnstile, chances are not good your team's going to bring home the Larry O'Brien.
A turnstile is smaller. Here are some of the interesting stats that I noticed about their postseason. And we don't talk enough about what they just did this postseason. It went 16-3. 16-3 for a postseason is pretty damn good. Better than what the Nuggets did last year, and I thought they were dominant. But here are some of the stats from this season that is insane. 10 30-point wins. That's a record in NBA history. 3 50-point wins. 17 25-point wins. There were more times this year when they were up 30 in a game, that's 17, than they were down 10 in a game. That's 16. They only lost one season series against anyone this year. That was the Nuggets. I would have loved to see that in the finals, but I think the Celtics team would have beat anybody. They won the East by the most in a half decade in 14 games. They averaged the best in NBA history, 1.22 points per possession. They never lost more than 2 games this season, never trailed in the playoff series. Weren't even close to losing that. They clinched a playoff series, a playoff spot 17 days before anybody else in the league clinched a playoff spot. And they had the best free throw discrepancy in playoff history in terms of teams. This is an insane run. And the fact that the biggest way to stop them was Jason Kidd going on an interview and saying Jaylen Brown was their best player. Great move. I have to say, didn't work, but that was their best move to win this series. And it showed. I don't think there was any team that could honestly hold a candle to this team 1 through 11 this year. And you mentioned, Mark, Drew Holiday. He was the missing piece of this puzzle, but he was also the missing piece because of who he left and how bad they got defensively because of him leaving and putting a chip on Drew Holiday's shoulder, which you don't necessarily see for a fucking NBA champion player. And this team proved that they have all-star upon all-star upon all-star, and they have a lineup that at their core can do this again very easily. We'll see what happens.
Yep.
All right, let's move on. We move on to baseball. Now, yes. Last show, our MLB Spidey sense went to the local teams, but now we open the floor to Around the MLB. Unless anyone objects, overruled regardless. Well, we won't talk about the Phillies' dominance, the Dodgers' schizophrenia, the Brewers' ability to just win 90 to 95 games out of thin air, the Astros being a few games under 500, or the fact that the godforsaken Royals would be a playoff team as of today. There are 3 things we would like to talk about from around the MLB. Jay, start us off.
Yeah, I mean the story, teams that can get talked about, and small spoiler alert, these guys are going to handle that. The player that has really stood out to me in terms of what he's done, and more so because he's a rookie, is Paul Skeens for the Pittsburgh Pirates. It's been a minute since Pittsburgh Pirates fans had an ace starter develop right before their eyes. Former #1 overall pick Garrett Cole put up an all-star season in 2015, but he didn't become a dominant starter until after he was traded to Houston and didn't win his first Cy Young Award until 2023 with the New York Yankees. You have to go all the way back to Doug Drabek in 1992, 32 years ago, to find a Pirates pitcher with a Cy Young Award. That Silas streak may not get broken this year, but if Skeens keeps putting up numbers like he has so far this season, you can see Pirates fans eagerly envisioning it happening sooner rather than later. Skeens is 4-0, and the Pirates are 6-1 in his starts, with 5 of those starts being quality starts. He has struck out 7 or more 6 times while allowing multiple walks in a start just once. He's allowed 3 runs or less in each of his starts. His ERA is 2.29. His fielding independent pitching is 2.39. 12.1 strikeouts per 9 innings, 1.6 walks per 9 innings. His strikeout to walk ratio is 7.57 to 1. His whip is 0.992. His ERA plus is 179. That means it's 79% better than the average major league pitcher. His home run percentage is just 2.6. His strikeout percentage is 34.4. His walk percentage is 4.6. His WAR is 1.6. If he had enough innings to qualify, he'd be in the top 10 in ERA, whip, strikeouts per 9, strikeouts to walk ratio, ERA plus, fielding independent pitching. He's thrown 65 pitches at 100 miles per hour or more. No other starting pitcher has thrown more than 36. That'd be Jose Soriano. He's walked just 7, struck out a major league best in that time, 53, with a 0.99 whip and a batting average against of just 221 on those 100 mile per hour plus pitches. He's in the 85th percentile or higher in expected ERA, expected batting average, fastball velocity, whiff percentage, strikeout percentage, and walk percentage. Per MajorLeagueBaseball.com's Sarah Lang, Skeens has already made a bit of baseball history. He's one of only 3 pitchers since 1901 with 50-plus strikeouts and fewer than 10 walks in his first 7 career appearances. The other 2 are his current Pirates rotation mate, Jared Jones, who's also done it this season, and Masahiro Tanaka in 2014 with the Yankees. What makes this even more impressive is that this is only Skeens' second full season as a full-time pitcher. He was a two-way player at the Air Force Academy in 21 and 22 before transferring to LSU, where he won the College World Series with the Tigers in 23, throwing 46 pitches at 100 miles per hour faster in LSU's 6-3 win over Tennessee. No less a pitching luminary than CC Sabathia is a fan of the Pirates' 22-year-old rookie starter, saying recently, quote, Paul Skeens is the real deal, and he's going to be a bona fide ace for a very long time. He's been electric, and I want to see him in the All-Star game. We'll see. The Pirates committed to not rushing Skeens this season, but having a pitcher who's 6'6" and 235 pounds with stuff like his will no doubt make holding firm to that plan a little tough. Though Skeens was pushed back from an expected Father's Day start in Colorado to face Cincinnati the following day, so they're actually trying to adhere to that plan so far. Pittsburgh Pirates general manager Ben Cherington spelled it out in a radio interview earlier this season, saying, quote, we don't want to go from 0 to 100 right away. Paul's so important to us long-term, so we want to be really thoughtful about that, meaning his workload. The prevailing theory is that the innings target for Skeen will be around 150 innings so as not to overwork him in his first season at the major league level, which should allow him to pitch into September, even if the Pirates occasionally push him back a day or skip a start entirely along the way. If Paul Skeens keeps going the way he's been going, and if the Pirates are actually able to keep him in Pittsburgh as he hopefully develops into an annual part of the National League Cy Young Award conversation, he has the potential to become, then, by the time it's all said and done, he may actually end up being more famous than another LSU Tiger, his NCAA national champion gymnast girlfriend.
Libby Dunn, by the way. I thought, yes, we know it's Libby Dunn, and yes, and also I thought we were going to go a whole second without mentioning Libby Dunn, but unfortunately, it didn't happen.
Come on, look, you can't go any.
Unfortunately, you can't. Unfortunately, you can't. It's kind of annoying. Just my opinion. But one thing that's actually really interesting about this whole thing is one thing that I find really fascinating is what these teams, there are 9 teams right now. Once you get past the Braves, who were the first wild card, we're halfway through the season almost. There are 9 teams within 2.5 games of each other for wild card spot 2 and wild card spot 3. Pittsburgh is obviously one of them. It's literally everybody except for Colorado and the Marlins. So I'm very curious to see what teams do in this part of the season. But I want to see Skeens be really good because there's a lot of good players out there that we've seen that unfortunately peaked way too early. All right, Anthony, you're up. Give me your team that has surprised, shocked, didn't something for you, made you feel some way in 2024 so far.
Well, if you ask me, who would be leading the American League Western Division on June 22nd, I would guess would maybe the defending champion Texas Rangers, maybe the perennial playoff mainstays, the Houston Nationals. If you have the Seattle Mariners on your bingo card, can you win the prize big time? With us fans, to quote the great Jim Cornette, guess who just won the pony? It's the Mariners because they are 44. It came into today's game at 44-34 in first place. A game and a half lead a month ago on May 11th have stretched out to as many as 9. Just at the beginning of this week, it's now at 7.5. They came into the season at plus 300 to win the division. Obviously, when you have the defending champs and the perennial powerhouse in your own backyard. But after a weekend sweeping Texas last weekend, the Mariners have won 18 of their last 23 games before, and I joked to Rabbi about this earlier, they hit a mini 3-game scan, which they broke early this afternoon with a 9-0 victory over the Miami Marlins. Now there are 10-3 against the Astros and the Rangers respectively head-to-head so far this season, 27-12 in T-Mobile Park. So they've taken advantage of one of the better stadiums in Major League Baseball and one of the best home field advantages that we've seen in a number of years, especially when the Mariners are definitely good. And we saw it a couple of years ago in the postseason when the team is good and the fan base is engaged. The strength has been the pitching, and you think about the rotation: Luis Castillo, George Kirby, and Logan Gilbert's kind of giving them a bit of a three-headed rotation, 300 months at the top of the rotation. Brian Wu has been very good in his handful of starts, but they also when you're throwing Bryce Miller, they have 4 qualified starters with a whip of 1.15 or lower. Gilbert has a whip of 0.92. Miller has 0.98, and the last 2 teams to have 4 pitchers with a whip of 1.15 or lower, the 2016 Cubs, who won the World Series, and the last American League team was the 1968 Cleveland, formerly known as Cleveland Indians. Well, here's the outliner for this Mariner team. Now, the 2001 Mariners is linked with the 1906 Chicago White Sox. The most regular season wins without winning World Series. This Mariner team is also linked to that 1906 team. Has a team that could set the record for the lowest team batting average in league history to possibly win a World Series. The bat has a team 219. This is like 29th out of 30 teams in Major League Baseball. But here's another stat that is kind of one of those baseball moments. They're 17-7 in one-run games. So even if they played 500 the rest of the way, they're in the division with 87 to 89 wins, probably gives them the division title and home field advantage in a possible in a division series. So this Maryland team, they have, we say the term all the time, because baseball, they are the living personification of because baseball. Great pitching, great defense, timely hitting, maybe not the greatest hitting in the world, but timely hitting nonetheless. And now here they are now a 7.5 game lead in the division. Going into an All-Star break, it's going to be interesting to see if the Rangers or the Astros turn their mind in the second half of the season. Because right now the Mariners, if they can avoid many slumps and many losing streaks, could turn this division to a laugher by early September. So the Mariners are definitely a team to kind of keep an eye on if they can if they can add some offense to the trade deadline. Pete Alonso was someone that kind of popped up in trade rumors, but the Mets have kind of gone on their own little run to kind of play their way back into postseason contention. So we shall wait and see.
Yeah, Seattle had some good seasons last few years, and hopefully, if they can get into the playoffs, they can finally kind of overcome some of those playoff disasters that they had, especially against Houston that year. Remember the Toronto Blue Jays the comeback? That was the Seattle team has hit some good peaks over the last few years. Now, Cleveland, not a surprise in my opinion, because they're a good team. But what if I told you that the Cleveland Indians have the least amount of losses in baseball right now for 26? What if I told you that they have the second best record in all of baseball at 48-26? The best home record in all of baseball from 25-9. And they're leading their division by 7.5 games. Mind you, by the way, this is a 3 playoff team division right now. Minnesota and Kansas City would both qualify for the playoffs as the second and third wild card respectively. They are 17-9 against teams over 500, a plus 103 win differential. They're the team that beat the Seattle Mariners last week in the last 2 games that Anthony was talking about to start a little bit of a skid. No name pitching almost when you think about it. But did you know that Carlos Carrasco is back with the Indians? I almost didn't know until I looked at it. He isn't the greatest of players. He's about as bad as he was with the Mets. He's 3-6 with the 5.40 ERA. You have Logan Allen, who's 8-3 with this team. He has a 5.23 ERA. Yeah, Ben Lively, Tanner. Who are these people? Where the Indians really do is their hitting. How about Stephen Kwan, who in his last 209 plate appearances is batting a slash line of 396, 457, 556. That is, as we would say in the business, a very Judgian like stat line when you think about it after everything. He had a 44 plate appearance streak that was broken earlier this week where he didn't strike out. He's only had 15 strikeouts all year. They have surprises like Will Brennan. He's hitting 326, 367, 565. Jose Ramirez is being the player who is definitely an MVP candidate for this team. Believe it or not, we saw the Cleveland Guardians. I might have called them the Indians once or twice. I apologize.
You did, but it's okay.
It's fine. It's very understandable. But the Guardians, this is a team that hasn't won a World Series since 1948. And shockingly, they're a World Series contender right now because honestly, the AL is no real team that has kind of separated themselves from the pack. I think the Orioles are the best team in baseball, but that's definitely not a guarantee that they're going to do it. They had a terrible postseason last year. The Yankees have their flaws, as we've seen, but they still are very good. The Twins and Royals are there, the Mariners, and eventually the Astros and Rangers are going to join the chase. But I really, really think that just seeing the Guardians and seeing Cleveland, by the way, Anthony, did you know that they had a special guest DJ there tonight? Shaquille O'Neal randomly DJ'd tonight in there, yes. And it's like, I'll come back if this team is in the World Series, or I'll come back around that time. They might be in the World Series at this rate. The Cleveland Guardians are one of the best teams that you don't know about right now. Cleveland was one of his 12 teams that he played for, so let's give him a little bit of credit there. But this is a team that is shockingly good. I know they went to 5 with the Yankees 2 seasons ago, but the fact that they're on this pace this year, they're on pace to win 105 games. They have not lost a game this year when they went into the 9th inning with the lead. They're 43-0. And this could be, if this keeps up, their second most fruitful season in franchise history. Like I said, on pace to win 105 games. The only time they won more was 111 back in the days, back in the old days, like the 50s. So be prepared to visit Progressive Field a little bit more now and then between now and October, because Cleveland Guardians are here, shockingly, and they're really, really good.
Hey, look, I would say this. In the last 7 days, we have been blessed with Shaq being a DJ, Snoop Dogg in a broadcast booth, and being a prognosticator because he predicted the Edmonton Oilers winning Game 6 3 days ago, and we saw what happened 24 hours ago. Look, you know what? It's a funny day too because I just talked about Seattle. I talked about you just talked about Cleveland. There's a chance that these two teams could run into each other in the postseason. I mean, it's not outside of realm considering these are it can always happen, and it's going to be an interesting second half of the season. Obviously, we're still a few weeks away from the All-Star break. There's still a lot of baseball to go, and we don't know how teams are going to play itself out for the trade deadline. But that's going to be interesting too because now it seems like outside of two teams, the entire National League is still in the pennant race.
Yep.
So I don't know who's going. It's going to
Insane.
be interesting to see who actually becomes a buyer or a seller. We know who's going to be a buyer. Who's going to actually become a seller at this point?
Hey, guys, I think we can end this segment by just paraphrasing Jason Stark. Because
baseball. Okay.
Baseball.
Oh,
all right.
It makes
Let's
sense.
move on and let's go for a little bit of a mid-show rant now, shall we?
Go for it.
For those who wanted the time to know where our Caitlin Clark moratorium would be lifted, here it is, 9/22 Saturday night. Please mark your clocks. We all enjoy Caitlin Clark on the court, but congratulations to you, the social media person, you, the hot take person, you, the person who is passionate about women's basketball. You have made me sick of CC. Here is how you can win me back, and I know you want to. Come closer to the screen. Listen to me now. Number one, do not think anywhere that Caitlin Clark deserved to be on the Olympic team. I respect your opinion on if you think that putting Caitlin grows the game. You're wrong, but I can respect it. The game of women's basketball in the Olympics is the Olympics. It's any sport of the Olympics. It sells itself. Unfortunately, that's not time for your agenda. I could give you stats on why Caitlin Clark really deserved to be in over the 40-plus-year-old Diana Taurasi or vice versa, but I really don't. I'll leave the stats up to these guys, and then you can fast forward and scroll through those stats and then realize that's not the issue here. Caitlin would have been the youngest woman on the team. Caitlin would have been the least experienced, and Caitlin would have been someone who didn't even practice at Olympic camp because she was too busy finishing her time in Iowa. All this equals not a worthy candidate that wouldn't be discussed if it was anybody else. She wouldn't have been starting anyway. You're not going to tell Asia Wilson that she deserves less time playing than Caitlin Clark because that's Caitlin Clark. Everyone loves her. When you get a gold medal on the podium, it doesn't list the demo rating of the women's final on NBC on the other side. Sorry, it's a gold medal, and the U.S. and us need to find the best players for the best team. And while Clark is great, she needs even more, a little bit more of time to reach that level. Number two, Caitlin Clark is not the savior of women's basketball. While the Iowa Standout has had more attendance for the Indiana Fever in 5 games than in all of 2024, and a game between the Mystics and the Fever, who, as we would say in our language, is basura, it drew the largest attendance for a game of any in 17 years. Oh, and the average ticket price of the Fever Sky game tomorrow goes for about $271. That's the highest number this season. But 3 of the top 10 games this season of that average ticket price do not involve the Fever. Almost 50% of the WNBA games are sellouts this year. We don't care what Caitlin Clark is doing. We also care what Camila Cardozo is doing, Aaliyah Wilson, and even what Angel Reese is doing. We'll get to her in a second. Women's basketball is closer to a revival due to the fact that we have a talent pool in women's basketball, unlike which we've ever seen since the W's debut, which unfortunately also includes Cameron Brink, which will be without after her season was ruled this week due to an ACL injury. And due to Angel Reese, here's number 3. There are no rivalries in my mind, not even one-sided because of Caitlin. Stop trying to make fetch happen, as Mean Girls used to say. Women's hatred is not a thing. Yes, I know this is going to be the hardest thing to get over. I'm looking at you, Jay. But what has happened has really gotten the attention over Angel. But what has happened really on the attention over Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark has just gone a little bit too far. While Angel's actions look bad, clapping up Kennedy Carter hitting big flagrant 2 didn't work, as the flagrant 1 just a little over a week ago didn't help either. Angel is about to be the villain, which she's embracing, but she doesn't deserve. She is brash. That's who she is. She is annoying. That's who she is. She's closer to the Dennis Rodman of the WNBA than the Michael Jordan of it. And that's okay. Just because it's women's basketball, not everyone needs to be the scorer and or national hero. And when you say, well, she'll be better if she scores more, CC fans might be butthurt to say that Reese scores 4 points less than Clark does per season, but Angel leads Clark by rebounds by over 5 rebounds a game. And Caitlin Clark is no slouch. She's top 20 in the league in rebounds per game so far. Once the sex of the player changes, doesn't mean we can't accept the role just as much. And for anyone else who shows resentment to Clark, Clark doesn't deserve this, but she understands the target she has. And believe me, she might be embracing her inner superwoman too. Even if I was a 15-year player in this league and see people ignoring me and putting all the credit on her, jealousy isn't just an emotion. It's a natural feeling. And as much as I hate to say it, one that I might have if I'm in someone else's shoes. Doesn't mean you can't Kennedy Carter her, as I would like to say, but still, it's a thing. And finally, and I hate to do this because politics of the WNBA are like oil and cereal for me, not oil and water, it's even worse. Yeah. Stop making Caitlin Clark your poster girl for white America. Whether you hate her because she's white and straight or hate people who go against her because she's white and straight, some people claim that the WNBA is 70% African American and lesbian. There are some people that have proven that the number of lesbian players in the league is actually around like 35 to 40%. Either way, leave her alone.
Either way.
We want to see Caitlin Clark get buckets from anywhere on the floor, not being beloved by white nationalists from anywhere in the country. We want to see Caitlin Clark be a trailblazer, not a mascot for America who people like to take a place to anything. We want to see Caitlin Clark, Indiana Fever star, not Caitlin Clark, guy who gives Stephen Rabinowitz a fever because people make me sick when they have a hot take, which is usually uninformed. So do me a favor, follow these tips, because we've already learned that Caitlin Clark is one of one. And if you don't stop doing this, Caitlin Clark will be one of one footnote on why I hate the way we've gotten off to the summer of 2004. Leave her alone. Let her play in peace. Thoughts, guys?
Anthony, I got a whole thing lined up, so I'm gonna give you the floor, and I'm gonna wrap it up.
I'll say this. I'll talk to you guys about this. A lot of the talk surrounding Caitlin Clark until obviously the injuries and it has been anything but basketball. Mm-hmm. And I've said this before. It's unfair to Caitlin Clark. It's unfair to Asia Reese. It's unfair to Asia Wilson, Cardoza, Breonna Stewart, all these great, exceptional young women and talent that makes up the WNBA. It's unfair to everyone involved. Is there, and I would say there's a little bit of everything. Just been to say that there's not a little animosity. That's kind of downplay. There might be a little animosity, but not to the point where, just a little bit. I mean, look, we've seen it because you see the veterans who've been in the league a long time and they've been fighting for years for something as far as like charter flights, just little things like that. And here comes this 22-year-old rookie phenom who's basically having things handed to her, at least in their eyes, and also the competitors. Like a flavor one in the NBA in a college game is nothing. It's over. But it's a week-long topic of discussion on these hot take shows and social media. There've been conversations that unfortunately was used Clark and Angel Reese as far as race, which has gotten to the point where it's been, especially to me, very uncomfortable reading some of these comments on social media. And it's also, to me, and I've been a WNBA fan from day one. I was at one point I was a season ticket holder to Liberty when they played at Madison Square Garden. The first decade and a half of existence. And I would go to the games, and I grew up, with Rebecca Lobo, Teresa Weatherspoon, and Becky Hammond, Sue Wicks, and Kim Hampton, these great players. And and now to see that the game has grown and getting the attention it deserves, it's great until you realize that some of the attention is not basketball related, and you got people coming in claiming that they're taking it to the next level. That they've always been kind of a flag bearer for women's sports, which was bullshit. But you know, and I know that's something that the WNBA did not want the league to be in that microscope. As far as the Team USA thing, I looked at this roster and I was like, okay, I don't see what Caitlin Clark's going to get playing time over a Kelsey Plum or a Sabrina Ionescu or a Chelsea Gray, and I was like, wait, these are three players who are three All-Stars. Two of these young women are coming off the bench, which tells you just how good and stacked Team USA. And she's certainly not getting playing time over Diana Taurasi. So I don't see where you're not going to put her on Team USA just so she can be on the bench. I know there were people that brought up
which she would be, by the way.
On the Dream Team, but Christian Laettner didn't get much playing time. He wasn't getting a lot of playing time ahead of
Anybody else,
Charles Barkley, or anybody else on that roster. And Anthony Davis was on the 2012 Olympic team. Coming out of college, he didn't get much playing time until it was like maybe garbage time or someone was in foul trouble. They just needed a body in minutes. So I think people need to put that in perspective. And look, I think Caitlin Clark, how she and the way she's handled herself, and she's even talked about, she's even condemned how her name has been used in these misogynistic and sometimes racist conversations that we've seen in social media and even right-wing media. And she even talked about that the only people that's making a rivalry between her and Angel Reese is you guys, talking about the media. We see it as one game, and we're competitors. It was just, and that's the way it should be. It's like, look, they're competitors just like the men are. There's no exceptions to the rule. They're gonna play hard. They're gonna be hard contact. And no, she should not get special treatment because everyone likes her, and suddenly she's bringing new eyes to the WNBA. That is not how it works. I didn't see Michael Jordan getting special treatment. I seen him getting the crap kicked out of him his first few years in the NBA just because he was Michael Jordan. So I really do think everyone, and I think not making the Olympic team would be the best thing that happened to Caitlin Clark, considering she has not had an off season. She went straight from competing for a national championship to the WNBA draft and pretty much straight to a WNBA team where they played their first 11 games in 20 days. They had no practice time and got out to a lousy start. Now you see them playing better because they've had to play the practice time to get to know each other and get their teammates. But also, I think the Olympic break, which I think is like 3 weeks this year, 3-4 weeks, it's going to give her time to really know her teammates, to rest her body, to get to the weight room, build herself up a little bit. Because what catches the rookies off right away is the physicality of the professional level, and that's something that even she admitted that. She said her work with the WNBA moment was getting screamed by Breonna Stewart and popping the eardrum in the process because she didn't see it coming, and none of her teammates called out the screen when it happened. But this is something she's gonna learn. And you mentioned Angel Reese. Angel Reese.
Well, yeah.
There's a difference between embracing the role of the villain and deserving the role of villain. And I don't think she deserved to be villainized because we all love Caitlin Clark and someone's got to be the villain, and she's going to be unapologetically who she is. You keep this in mind. She's a 23-year-old young woman who graduated. Graduated from LSU, has been a phenomenal rookie player for the Chicago Sky. She set the WNBA record, I think, for most double-doubles in consecutive games. And she leads the WNBA in offensive rebounds. And I think she's going to be an exceptional player for years to come. And I just don't, like I said, I think
There's a lot. There's a lot
a
to
lot of
kind
people
of.
just need to take a step, just to take a step back, breathe a little bit, and realize these women that are under 20, 22, 23 years old. You know, this is their first year. They're going to have their ups and downs, and it's like breathe a little bit, okay? Not everything has to be a discussion. Um, and using these young women for your
We could.
personal agendas
We,
and takes. It's like, look, at the end of the day, and it's about basketball. It's about the sport. It's about the game. And I'm happy to see, like I said, I'm happy to see the
yeah,
Las
yeah,
Vegas
no,
Aces sell out
absolutely.
all their games and to see to see the Barclays Center
Uh,
packed and to see these great things. But at the same time, we, I think a lot of people who are new to this need to take a step back and just realize that you're starting to take the fun away from all the people who were fans, who's always been fans, who was appreciated what
yeah,
these
of
women
course,
has brought to the game
absolutely.
of basketball.
I do want to
And
get Jay's
just
thoughts on
yeah,
this since Jay offers a more of a different perspective
yeah.
of all of this. Jay, I've talked to you enough about this. I know you have your thoughts. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you guys, you as in the audience, some context. Rabbi and I have kind of been wanting to do this segment for a while. You know, the three of us, we've been following Caitlin Clark's career for her last 2 years in college basketball,
I
and
followed
the
her last
transition.
3 and 4 years. I followed all of it, so I know
Okay.
exactly what we've
You know,
seen from
right.
this.
So, and the transition to the WNBA and everything that's come along with it on and off the court. Rabbi's been holding that rant for a while. And Anthony is his bigger Liberty fan than I am, and being right down the block from the Barclays. We've kind of been wanting to touch on this for a while. I got two halves of this for me. One's I'm going to start with the basketball stuff because I think that's been getting lost, and then I will, as I'm going to say, get to the rest of it. As far as the basketball goes, Clark was always going to have a target on her back. All number one overall picks do. But with the college career she had, coupled with being the literal face of women's college basketball, it was likely going to be at a different level than even, say, what Candace Parker went through when she first came into the league. But there's a difference between, say, the welcome to the WNBA Rook hard screens from Brianna Stewart set and Sabrina Ionescu ran Clark into during the rookie's first trip to the Barclays Center, and the cheap shot that Kennedy Carter laid on her. There's no place in the WNBA for plays like that. And the fact that the refs didn't initially call it a flagrant foul is proof that the state of refereeing in the league is absolutely awful, and now more eyes are seeing it. Has Clark struggled adapting to the professional level? Sure. Unlike the NBA, where there's plenty of off-season runway after the draft for rookies to start getting accustomed to the differences between the college and pro games well before even training camp convenes, Las Vegas Summer League, for example, the rookies coming into the WNBA have almost zero ramp-up time. Caitlin Clark, as you guys have both said, went from playing in the Final Four to playing preseason WNBA games in what amounts to a New York minute. It's enough to give any 22-year-old whiplash, let alone one with the weight of the WNBA's next generation on her shoulders. It's not a role she actually had any choice in, by the way, but she's paying the price for it nonetheless. And I'll get more into that in a second. Some basketball things to keep in mind as you watch Clark this season. The Indiana Fever are a bad team. Have been pretty much since Tamika Catchings retired after the 2016 season. It's why they've had the top pick in 2 straight drafts. Clark's struggles have as much to do with that as anything else. Add to that, as Anthony alluded to, playing their first 11 games in just 17 days, including a road trip to Seattle, LA, and Vegas, where they played 3 games in 5 days, which doesn't allow for much practice time, and you can see why the Fever started 2-9. I'm also not sure that Christy Sides is the best coach for a player like Clark. I'm not the only one thinking that. And I'm not sure GM Lynn Dunn has so far done the best job of building a roster with players whose skill sets best complement a player like Clark. We'll see. I knew Caitlin would get exposed on defense. She wasn't asked to do much of that at that end of the floor for Iowa as her teammates covered for her, knowing how much energy she expended being the focal point of the offense. Remember, Unlike she has to guard the opposition's lead ball handler a lot of the time in the WNBA. Iowa had Gabby Marshall for that. But here's the thing. You can't be, to use a phrase I used in our NBA segment, you can't be a New York City subway turnstile on defense in the W. The Fever are minus 11 points per 100 possessions with Clark on the court. There are too many really good offensive players, and they know how to hunt weak defenders and get them in screen and roll actions just as well as their NBA brethren do. Sab and Stewie ate Clark alive in that game back in May, and I had a front row seat to it. I also knew that without enough practice time, it'd take longer for the Fever to adjust to someone who sees the floor and passes the way Clark does. Hence, the rookie is leading the league in turnover. She averages 5.5 per game and has topped 7 or more 6 times, including 10 in her debut. But she's also 4th in the league in assists at 6.2 per game. She's averaging 16.3 points per game, tops among all rookies, though that's more due to high volume. Her usage rate of 27.1 is 7th, and she's the only rookie in the top 10, as opposed to a high shooting percentage, as she's under 40% from the floor overall and under 33% from beyond the arc, with an effective field goal percentage of less than 50% and a true shooting percentage of just 56.5. Now, all of this will sort itself out over time as she gets used to playing basketball at this level. Now for the rest of it. Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi were correct about Caitlin's intro into the WNBA being a serious reality check, and the crap they got for saying so was unwarranted. They were pointing out that all rookies get there, as I said, welcome to the league moment, and that some of the things Caitlin was able to do in college would not work in a league of grown-ass women. I have no issue with that. What I do take issue with is that it seems that some of these players have a vendetta against her because of what she is, not who she is. And it doesn't help that, as I said at the top, WNBA refs are flat out awful. Circling back to the Carter incident, I did not realize that Carter was a head case and has been bounced from more than one team for her behavior.
4th overall pick, by the way, originally.
There you go. Give Clark credit for, as Anthony said, not playing the victim and taking the high ground in her post-game comments about it, as she's done for almost everything. As for Angel Reese, I understand her wanting to be one of the faces of the WNBA's next generation. Her skills as a player have her set up for that, and it's a fine ambition. But the way she is going about it does not sit well with me at all. Her reaction to that play, clapping loudly, cheering Carter on, and then hugging her after one of the more thug-like plays I've seen since the NBA in the 90s, you're showing me exactly who you are. I don't care how you try and mitigate it or attempt to walk even part of it the way back. You straight up hate Caitlin Clark, and it's abundantly clear that you don't like that she's getting more attention than you are. As for the other players in the W being annoyed with the way the league's PR machine and the media is focusing on Clark, well, that's not Caitlin's fault, but they're taking it out on her, as I said earlier, sometimes beyond the aforementioned and expected welcome to the league rook type of stuff. When the rabbi and I were exchanging text on this last week, I told him that my reaction to Carter and Reese might be a little more visceral than his or anyone else's, because I saw Becky Hammon go through some of the same stuff once she started putting up numbers and taking player time away from Taretha Witherspoon, who I will give props to for the way she handled both Carter and Reese's reaction. She said, that is not us. It does make me wonder if there's a decent percentage of the predominantly black women who make up the WNBA that flat out hate it when any pretty white girl gets what they feel is too much attention from the league, from the fans, from the media. And speaking of fans, let me say this to the fans who followed Clark to the WNBA and were talking about how their girl was going to light this league up. Y'all obviously have never watched a minute of a WNBA game prior to this season. Otherwise, you would not be so arrogant as to say such utterly stupid things like that. All of your talk is partly to blame for the Clark having as big a target on her back as she does, and no less a luminary than Gino Auriemma agrees with me on that. As for the race angle, well, the race card was always going to get played by someone when a white girl, especially a pretty straight white girl, gets all this attention in a league that's predominantly made up of black women. I don't know if that should be focused on as much as it has been by some, but the fact that it is at all is partly due to the sad state of our society these days. So no matter who in the media talks about it, whether it's black men like Michael Wilbon and Jim Trotter, or white men like John Greenberg and Andrew Marchand, some folks will automatically accuse them of playing the race card and furthering some white versus black narrative and using Caitlin Clark as a weapon to do so. I understand Caitlin initially giving somewhat of a cliche-like non-answer when she was asked about folks doing that, and I understand why she got crap from some of the black players about it. She's walking a very fine line. As a white man who has talked about race issues on this show more times than I have liked to for a show that's devoted to sports, I can understand that. It's not an easy road to navigate, and it's patently unfair that a 22-year-old kid who just wants to play basketball has to do so. I think she's going to be a pretty good player in this league for a very long time, and I eagerly look forward to the day when the only talk regarding Caitlin Clark is about what she did on the court. P.S. Shep, I love you, buddy, but I agree 100% with Kevin Durant and the rabbi that Caitlin did not warrant being on Team USA for the 2024 Summer Olympics. That roster is stacked, and it doesn't need her to win basketball games on the court or the marketing and ratings game off it.
Well, one of the things I had, yeah, I figured you were done. One of the things that I had said beforehand is like it's there are some opinions like Christine Brennan of USA Today that says, and again, I agree with them. It's nothing. It's actually a good thought. It's like she's been to a lot of these events and has seen women's basketball just get no coverage and no one in the backstage locker room and interviewing. And I understand that, but this is the Olympics, and I honestly think that it is a made for TV event. It is something where you have to put the best team together. I think putting Clark on that team adds a distraction. She's a very good player, but honestly,
yes,
it could be a net negative towards the whole thing to put attention on somebody who's going to end up playing, like we said, 5 to 10 minutes a game. On the Angel Reese stuff, it's a kind of agree to disagree thing, and I understand what your thought is, and I understand what the visceral portion is, and again, we can go about this all day. The one thing I would say, though, is this. Caitlin Clark, for me, and I understand you, for me, there's just no comparison because of the attention that she's gotten and the train that is built up to this moment. I know that's the thing. This is an unprecedented time in terms of the WNBA, and they're leaning into it too. They put Indiana Chicago on national TV tomorrow. That game was not initially scheduled for national TV because it's a rivalry. And by the way, they're fighting for the 8th playoff spot right now in a 12-team league. And by the way, Indiana is now 7-11 because their schedule did die down and they are playing teams that are closer to their level. I just think I actually am going to take this back to what to me in a conversation that Anthony has had about Michael Jordan that kind of relates to Caitlin Clark. Michael Jordan was around in social media times. We would think of Michael Jordan a ton differently than we do now. Unfortunately, because of social media, unfortunately, because there's 7,500 hot take shows out there, this is
everything's heightened.
Everything is heightened, and we can't
Come on now, Rabbi.
We're there.
Avoid hot take.
We tried to, but I just ranted we just ranted for 20 minutes, so we'll have to call it that for now.
Ranting against the hot take culture.
I'm hot taking a rant against hot taking. But the one thing I would have to say is it's true. You can hot take against hot taking. But I think the one thing is that one, but I think the one thing it is for certain is we can never have nice things, and I think everything will eventually get picked apart in one way or another, and that's something I hate about this society right now.
Agreed.
All right, let's move on to the final section of the night, and now we get to do the thing I'd like to talk the most about: media rights. Let's go. The major storyline off the court for the NBA this offseason is actually who will broadcast games starting in 2025-2026. Specifically, TNT Turner Sports, who, even though they had an exclusive negotiation window, continued to lowball Adam Silver to the extent that you might have thought that Turner head David Zaslav read The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump before going to the negotiating table. Now the fallout is massive, even though it's not officially official. ABC ESPN is going to retain a decent amount of NBA rights, including the NBA Finals. For that moment that they're predominantly Knicks coverage when they actually make the NBA Finals, they can actually slant it correctly towards the New York Knicks. Along with new partners Amazon and NBC, and oh baby, Round Ball Rock 2.0 is coming. John Tesh has even admitted that he is working on a new version in the studio. All right. But Turner is about to be left out of the NBA business entirely if this all comes to fruition. And just a week ago, Charles Barkley has already announced that regardless of what happens, 2024 is his last year of working for any basketball media. Anthony, such a long, strange trip for what many would say is a very unsatisfying result in the end.
I know when people talked about how they yearn for the days of the NBA and ABC, they were hoping that it was taken away from ABC and ESPN and with the much talked about mediocre coverage of the NBA Finals yeah. I don't if I the next time I want to see the Knicks doing NBA Finals coverage, I want to see them playing, not being analysts.
There were
doing a halftime show.
three games.
Two of them.
Yes. 3 games. I love it. And I hate it at the same time.
But I think about this. TNT, a ton of sports have been involved with the NBA. You gotta go all the way back to the mid '80s with TBS, and obviously TNT came into the picture in 1989, and has been pretty much a staple of the NBA over the last 30 plus years. Yeah, I remember for me, brief time I lived in Mobile, Alabama. TNT was really the first time I got to really watch Magic versus Bird, and it had to do with an NBA Finals game. I got to watch them in the middle of January play the second half of a doubleheader game. And I got to watch it. I got to actually watch the Knicks on national television, and it had to do with MSG Network, or at the time they were playing on WWR TV. Back in the late '80s and going into the '90s. So for TNT, it was such a think about the playoff coverage, the 40 games and 40 nights monster. They would have the double headers and sometimes triple headers during the weekends. But also you think about inside the NBA being such a cultural day in the NBA, and how it gave us great personalities. Obviously, Ernie Johnson being one. The late Craig Sager, another guy that was introduced to America through Turner Sports, and the exposure to play-by-play men like Kevin Harlan and Brian Anderson, and remember Turner gave Marv Albert his second
redemption.
His redemption's second breath of broadcast on life after everything that happened with him. And he became the voice of Turner Sports for many, many years until he retired back in 2021. It's kind of a somber realization. Obviously, now things have not been finalized yet. We're just going by reports that's been put out there, but it is kind of somber to kind of see something that that's been a mainstay as part of NBA culture for so long. Through the Jordan era, and obviously Kobe, Tim Duncan, and obviously through LeBron, the Golden State Warriors era and everything. And getting David Zaslav saying that the network didn't need the NBA to thrive. Well, once upon a time, NBC thought the same thing, and for 5 years until they got Sunday Night Football, they really didn't have a sports division. So there was a reason why they're kicking out so much money now to get the NBA back, and it's not just about the money and the league rights. It's also you can the production and everything you build from that package deal. And we've seen it with Fox. Remember when they got the NFC package from CBS, they pretty much built the entire sports division around the National Football League, particularly the NFC. They came at a time where the Cowboys and 49ers rivalry was at its peak in the 90s. So it was just great timing, and everything lined up for it. So, but like I said, for the fans, it's kind of somber, but obviously you move on. The league is not going away. Games will still be accessible. We'll still watch the games. You'll still tune in. But it's not going. It won't be the same. When you tune in and inside the NBA, you're not going to see Kenny Smith racing to the big screen. Shaq maybe stumbling, tripping into an object, trying to outrace him. Or Charles Barkley saying something crazy, or for whatever reason making fun of the women of San Antonio, Texas. Or Ernie Johnson, kind of being the Strait police officer, and keeping these crazy personalities all on the same page. Even having his own little quips. Remember the video of Kenny Smith trying to replicate Kobe Bryant jumping over a car, and he gets knocked over, and then we zoom in. It's Odie behind the steering wheel. So moments like that, and you realize why it was such a popular pre and post game show. And if this is truly the end, I hope next season they are able to go out with a bang. Next year, I think they get the Eastern Conference Finals, because they, obviously it's going to be
yes, they switch up every year.
The conference finals, so they'll have the Eastern Conference Finals, and next year TNT will also have the Stanley Cup Finals for the second time. So if this is the swan song, I'm hoping Turner Sports allow it to go out with a bang and a memorable final season. And for those guys, particularly Ernie Johnson, who has just been the personification of class through so many years, hopefully it could be a memorable one for everyone involved.
By the way, correction, because I am your media historian, Mara did get hired back by NBC as their #1 analyst for the last 2 years of the NBA package in 01 and 02. He did move over in 03, but he was back in the lead role, calling the Lakers' second and third portion of the three-peat in 2001 and 2002. So just a little cleaning up here. I usually wouldn't care, but as the media guy here, I will correct every one of your single mistakes on media right now. Jay, like I said, it's not the end of an era, and it's still not officially the end of an era yet, although, again, it's unofficially official, but this represents a change kind of in the landscape of all of basketball, honestly.
Yeah, straight up, I think Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav is an arrogant idiot to say that TNT doesn't need the NBA. TNT's been practically synonymous with the association for a generation, largely because of Inside the NBA and Charles Barkley. So to seemingly dismiss losing the NBA, and by extension, this iconic studio show from their sports inventory as no big deal, makes me want to Gibbs slap him, or at least have Barkley do it for me. I'd go so far as to say that the NBA, and by extension Inside the NBA, is the crown jewel of Turner Sports' inventory. So purely from a business decision standpoint, it's hubris bordering on stupidity, not to mention criminal negligence. As for Charles retiring, I'll believe it when I see it, because the Chuckster's kind of thrown out the R word before and not followed through. First time Barkley said he was considering retiring from broadcasting was in 2012, when he said that finishing his contract with Turner Sports would be a struggle. He was 49 years old at the time. The second time was in 2018, when he said he'd stop broadcasting once he hit age 60. He's now 61, and next year will mark his 25th year as a broadcaster, having been with TNT and Inside the NBA since 2000 after playing 16 years in the NBA. His current contract, I believe, Rabbi, correct me if I'm wrong, if you know, 8 more years on it.
You are correct.
But considering how things have gone down recently at Turner, I can see why Barkley is pissed enough to once again throw the R word around. Here's what he said most recently. This is the quote. "I ain't going nowhere other than TNT, but I have made the decision myself that no matter what happens, next year is going to be my last year on television. Morale sucks, plain and simple. I just feel so bad for the people I work with. These people have families, and I just really feel bad for them right now. These people I work with," he's talking about management, They screwed this thing up clearly. We don't have zero idea what's going to happen. I don't feel good. I'm not going to lie. Especially when they came out yesterday and said that we bought college football. TNT actually just added college football playoff games as part of a 5-year sub-licensing agreement with ESPN. I was like, oh, damn, they could have used that money to buy the NBA. We've never had college football, never been involved with college football. I'm like, wait a minute. Shouldn't we be spending every dime we got to keep the NBA? So morale sucks, to be honest with you, end quote. I 100% agree with Barkley, but I still don't think he's retiring. Richard Deitch, sports media columnist for The Athletic, wrote the following after Barkley's retirement remarks. Here's the passage. No one I spoke to in sports broadcasting over the weekend, including people who are close to Barkley, believe he would actually retire. One cited his enjoying the spotlight too much, and others said they believed he changed his mind when someone made it clear how much they wanted him. I spoke to one sports television executive who hires NBA talent who said people who have been in the public spotlight as long as Barkley do not easily give that up. The executive believed Barkley would change his mind. There are also people at Warner Brothers Discovery who believe something can be worked out with Barkley with or without NBA media rights. I hope all those executives are correct. Losing TNT as an NBA partner, and by extension that means losing inside the NBA, would be sad. But I doubt the association or its fans would mourn for very long. They're used to change. Losing inside the NBA in general, and Charles Barkley specifically, all because of David Zaslav's ego. Well, that'd be a crime against the game of basketball. Here's hoping it doesn't come to that. But no matter how this next round of media rights deals finally shakes out, I really hope the Chuckster continues to be one of the best things about the NBA.
So here's my counteroffer to that. By the way, I looked up. There is a interview that he had with Jimmy Traina of SI in 2023. Who says, "I don't expect to be working that long." So even he admits the 10-year contract is kind of a sham. I do also think that there are points when I think it seems like Charles Barkley doesn't like to work a longer amount of time. I know he only works once or twice a week and gets paid millions of dollars. We would all love to do that. But I think there are points when someone does want to call it a career, although it depends to say who's going to shell out the money for them. Okay. What TNT and Turner has meant to the industry is huge. It is huge. And just not only the fact that you've seen from the days of Dick Stockton and Hubie Brown going from CBS to being that team's number one broadcasting team once NBC got the rights, to Kevin Harlan, to Marv Albert, to Mike Fratello, to Jeff Van Gundy, to Steve Kerr calling games. By the way, he was really damn good. I can't wait to see when he retires and see it again. To Cheryl Miller, one of the best players in women's basketball history, being on the sidelines.
Doug Collins as well.
Doug Collins, yes, Doug Collins. And all of the people who worked for them, even Jeff Van Gundy, by the way, worked for them for a very short period of time before jumping over to ESPN, ABC, and the people who work for them now: Jim Jackson, Grant Hill, Jamal Crawford, Greg Anthony, Stan Van Gundy, and his little self, who is always very cantankerous almost every time. But I love it. What NBA and Turner has had as a relationship is special to the game of NBA. When the media rights were changed in 2003 and Turner finally got a full NBA Finals instead of getting like 1 or 2 games with the rest being on NBC, I thought it was a big accomplishment. I think what's going to stink about this whole entire situation, assuming it happened, is if you look at the difference between ESPN game shows and Turner game shows. Inside the NBA is something that cares about the NBA, that talks about the NBA for at least 30 minutes pre-game, over 30 minutes post-game, has its comedy at the end, has Charles Barkley at least once a season finding out that Rafer Alston is not playing for the team that he thought he was playing for. It's just a perfect marriage of comedy and basketball. And that's what you want to see in a pregame show. Compared to ESPN, for when Game 1 of the 2024 NBA Finals came on, did a halftime show that mounted to the span of 17 seconds. They literally just used it really for ad breaks and other stuff. What has become the signal of a halftime show, it's almost always used for hot take topics. There was enough time in Game 1 of the NBA Finals where they were talking more about Dan Hurley than they were actually possibly going to the Lakers, than they were talking about Celtics Mavs. There have been...
That is what happens when a certain ESPN personality has
It's
too
ju-
big of a role.
It's not. Yes, I understand that, but it's just a mix of everything. The NBA studio show has never, ever worked. Did you know John Saunders used to host the ESPN studio show? Oh, yeah.
I did not
Mike
know
Greenberg, yes, he did. Mike Greenberg used to host the NBA studio show. Michelle Beadle used to host the NBA studio show. It is currently being done by Malika Andrews. Dan Patrick used to host the ESPN studio show. Stuart Scott used to host the ESPN studio show. Sage Steele, noted hated Republican now in American culture, used to host the ESPN studio show. The number of names that I have seen host ESPN's pregame and postgame coverage and has been insane. Mike Tirico used to host pregame shows also. The number is so insane that you have to realize when you go over to Turner and see the picture of stability that has been in there since me and Anthony graduated high school is insane. And what really needs to be known is I understand that maybe the NBA just didn't have Turner just didn't have the money to afford the NBA. I understand it maybe as a business decision, but as a fan, it sucks. It tremendously sucks in seeing it. But it'll be interesting to see how the media landscape changes once the contracts become official. And knowing us, they will probably now end up re-signing. But for what we really think, this is the end of an era, regardless of what happens. I do believe Barkley will leave next year. I know people are saying that's complete bullshit, but you know what? People get tired after a while. And I would rather see inside the NBA go out with a bang than seeing people complaining on social media for the next thousands of years that inside the NBA is not what it once was. We can hate almost everything in the... Let me finish. We can hate almost everything in the world, but one thing we almost all agree on as a nation is that inside the NBA is always entertaining. Now you can go if you want, if you don't have
Rabbi, it's funny, you went you went through the litany of people who have cycled through ESPN's NBA studio show over the years, and I did not realize the list was that extensive.
By the way, that's just host.
But then again,
don't even get me started on people on panels.
Oh, I know. And I got to tell you. No. And I didn't realize it was that extensive solely because I stopped paying attention to their NBA studio show years ago. What's interesting to me, and honestly, the current iteration, Malika Andrews is terrific. I like her. I can't stomach anybody else. It's interesting to me that you talk about how inside the NBA actually seems to care about NBA basketball. The only studio show that I see on ESPN that seems to care about professional basketball is the one for the WNBA.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying.
Yeah. It's actually really interesting to see that. And I think that women, it's one more thing. Let me finish. Yeah. This is something I passionately talk about sometimes. It's actually interesting. Sue Bird had a comment a while ago, and she had said she doesn't like to see these women on covering men's basketball. The reason why the women cover men's basketball is that they're actually better at it than the men are. And that's the reason why you see people like Monica McNutt, ESPN radio analyst now for the Knicks and the person who's called games. Somebody like Andrea Carter, who will be working with the NBA draft next week. Those people are actually better minds than a lot of other people. Name Montgomery as well. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, I was gonna say that you brought up the who's who the panelists that been on ESPN, ABC doing the halftime show. It just reminded me of the scene from The Naked Gun where they was at the game. It was like Vince Scully joined by Tim McCullough, joined by Dick Enberg, joined by this person, that person. And it was like the first scene that came into my mind. I was just like, you know what, I gotta bring this up.
Well played.
So hilarious.
Yep. Because you need 7 people at a table all the time. That's the way the freaking show works. And all of them saying nothing. Speaking of people that are saying nothing, we got to get out of here. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I'm Steven Rabinowitz. Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines is where you can see us live if you want to, but I really suggest you do. YouTube.com/OnTheSportsLines is where you can see our latest and greatest shows if you want to, but I suggest you do. And on Twitter and or X, whichever you'd like to call it. I'm perfectly fine with it, Jay.
The handle is ONTH Sports Lines, where you will find a link to this show. But if you were to go there literally right now after you finish watching us, you will see a link to that I just put up. 4 years ago, noted baseball writer Joe Posnanski completed the Baseball 100 project for The Athletic, and no surprise, Willie Mays was number 1. In the wake of number 24's passing on 6/18/24, a lot of 24s there, I've posted the link to that story. It was a terrific tribute to the Say Hey Kid back then, and it still resonates today. I highly recommend you go to our Twitter page, click the link. It's a really good read.
Also, I want to just note 2 other people that we've lost in the sports world since the last time we talked. I don't think we mentioned Bill Walton's passing about 2.5 weeks ago. One of the best college players, one of the best players in basketball history, and one of the best personalities in basketball history. And also, we've lost whatever is on that side of Jay's thing, the logo, Jerry West, a couple of days ago, and about a week ago, and one of the great basketball minds, and probably, if not the one of the greatest players of the 60s and 70s of the NBA. If you ever have a chance to watch him on anything, just do so. All right. See you next time on the Sports Lines. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.